You know that specific sound a bespoke leather briefcase makes when it hits a solid oak conference table? That heavy, muffled thud that screams, "I contain the fate of your quarterly bonus." I live for that sound. For 12 years, I was the ghost in the machine at Apex Logistics. My name is Donovan, 49 years old, and I was the senior strategy analyst who turned red ink into black. I was the man who whispered in the CEO's ear when the board was out for blood, the fixer who knew where all the corporate bodies were buried, because I was usually the one holding the shovel. I was not just an employee, I was the structural integrity of the entire firm. Julian, our CEO, a man whose tailored suits could not hide his sheer incompetence, called me his indispensable asset. He would look me in the eye over a scotch and say, "Donovan, when I move up to chairman, that chief strategy officer chair has your name etched into it." I believed him. That was my first mistake. My second mistake was assuming that competence still mattered in a world run by bloodlines and veneers. By the way, if you are into watching corporate empires crumble in real time or just want to see a man methodically dismantle a nepotism baby's life, go ahead and hit subscribe. The beginning of the end did not look like a disaster. It looked like a 23-year-old boy named Oliver. Oliver was Julian's nephew. He had a business degree from a university that sounded like a resort and the kind of unearned confidence that could only come from a trust fund. Julian brought him in as a special projects consultant. That is corporate code, for we need to give him a salary so he stops trying to become an influencer. "Donovan," Julian had said, leaning over my desk with a salesman grin, "take Oliver under your wing. Show him the ropes. It is good leadership practice for when you take the big chair next quarter." So I did. I showed him the ropes. I showed him the financial modeling software. I showed him how to read a profit and loss statement without complaining about being tired. I spent 6 months essentially running a daycare center for a boy who thought synergy meant wearing matching sneakers to work and who asked me if we could expense his gym membership. ICE fixed his slide decks at 3 in the morning. I rewrote his emails so he did not sound like a frat boy. I was polishing the very knife that was about to find a home between my shoulder blades. The betrayal happened on a Tuesday. It is always a Tuesday. Tuesdays are the days hope goes to die in a presentation. It was the third quarter all-hands meeting. The entire company was packed into the main auditorium. I was sitting in the front row, wearing my future executive suit. Julian was on stage, pacing back and forth. "We need fresh vision," Julian bellowed, his voice echoing off the walls. "We need agility. We need the kind of forward-thinking leadership that understands the new digital landscape." My stomach dropped. The only thing Julian knew about the digital landscape was how to lose his password. "That is why," Julian continued, gesturing to the wings of the stage, "I am thrilled to announce our new Chief Strategy Officer. Please welcome Oliver." The silence in the room was a physical vacuum. It sucked the air out of my lungs. I watched as Oliver bounced onto the stage, wearing an absurdly casual outfit, waving to a room full of people who had been working there longer than he had been alive. He grabbed the microphone. "Hey everyone," he cheered. "I am so pumped to take this company to the moon. We are going to disrupt everything." I did not blink. I felt like my blood had been replaced with ice water. I looked at Julian. He caught my eye for a split second, then immediately looked away. He knew. He knew exactly what he had done. He had taken my 12 years of loyalty, my 80-hour weeks, my saved deals, and he had handed them to a boy whose hardest decision in life was which filter to use on a photo. The applause was scattered and terrified. The chief financial officer, a man named Pierce, looked at me in pure horror. He knew who actually did the work. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. Instead, a cold, metallic calm settled over me. I stood up, smoothed my jacket, and walked out of the auditorium while Oliver was midway through a sentence about company vibes. I walked straight to my office. I did not pack a box. I sat down at my computer and typed 2 sentences to Julian. Subject: resignation. Congratulations to Oliver. I resign effective immediately. I hit send. Then I printed it, signed it, and walked it over to Human Resources. The Human Resources director, a woman named Chloe, looked at the paper, then at me. "Donovan," she whispered, her eyes wide. "Are you sure? Julian will lose his mind. We have the board meeting next week. Who is going to prepare the documents?" "Oliver is the chief strategy officer," I said, my voice perfectly smooth. I am sure he has a vision for the documents, but he does not know how to access the secure server, Chloe stammered. Sounds like a strategic challenge, I replied. Good luck, Chloe. I walked out of the building. The air smelled like exhaust, but to me it smelled like sweet liberation. My phone started buzzing in my pocket. Julian called once, twice, 10 times. I turned the phone off. They thought this was a tantrum. They thought I would go home, be angry for a while, and eventually come crawling back for a consulting gig. They thought the story ended here. But I was the architect. You do not fire the architect after you have moved into the house, especially when the architect knows the foundation is built on a sinkhole. I did not just leave, I left a void, and I knew with mathematical certainty that nature hates a vacuum. Oliver was not ready for the job, but he was ready for the fall. The next morning, I woke up to the silence of a calendar wiped clean. It was disorienting, but then the cold, crystalline rage took over. The kind of rage that topples regimes. I had to go back one last time for the exit interview. I dressed in a sharp black suit. When I walked into the lobby, the receptionist looked panicked. "Mr. Donovan," he whispered, "it is chaos upstairs." Oliver ordered a ping-pong table for the break room, but canceled the financial terminal subscriptions to pay for it. "Priorities," I said, breezing past security. When the doors opened on the 40th floor, the hum of productivity was gone. It was just nervous whispers. Oliver was in my office. He was sitting in my ergonomic chair, talking loudly on speakerphone. He saw me and did not look ashamed. "Oh, hey, Donovan," he chirped. "I was just vibing in here. Hope you do not mind." Julian said it was fine. "It is all yours, Oliver," I said flatly. "I am just here for my personal files." "Totally," he said. "No hard feelings, right? Uncle Julian said you were chill about it." I looked at the boy playing dress-up in a burning building. "No hard feelings," I lied. "Just a word of advice. Watch the fourth quarter projections. The spreadsheet has a macro that automatically updates from the legal server. If you break the link, the federal compliance system triggers a red flag." His eyes glazed over. "Macro? Is that a computer thing?" "Something similar." I unlocked my bottom drawer and took my private contacts. But I left one thing behind. A gray folder labeled Internal Audit and Governance Gaps. Inside was a memo detailing severe anomalies in how Julian handled vendor contracts. It was proof that issues were known, documented, and ignored. Oliver would not read it. He would probably use it as a coaster, but someone would find it. I walked out of the office and went to Human Resources. Chloe was sweating. "Julian wants to do the exit interview himself," she said. "No," I replied. "Standard forms only. I take my accrued vacation pay and I leave. If Julian wants to talk to me, he can speak to my attorney." As I walked to the elevator, Julian burst out of his corner office. "Donovan," he shouted, "do not be dramatic. Come back inside. We can create a role for you." Senior advisor to the chief strategy officer. I turned and looked at him. The audacity was breathtaking. He wanted me to do the work while his nephew took the credit. "Julian," I said loudly, "I do not do babysitting. You wanted a new direction. Enjoy the view." The elevator doors closed on his red, sputtering face. I walked out of the building with nothing but my briefcase. The weight of the clauses and codes in my head was heavy enough to crush them all. I was not unemployed. My first project was the demolition of Apex Logistics. To understand how I was going to ruin Julian, you have to go back 3 years. It was a rainy November. We were courting Oakwood Capital, a massive private equity firm. We needed their money to scale. The negotiations were brutal. Oakwood sent their lead counsel, a man named Wallace. Wallace was a legend. He did not argue. He just stared at you until you yielded. Julian was terrified of him. I was the point person on the deal structure, because Julian could not be bothered with boring legal details. It was 2 a.m. on the final night. "We need a safeguard," Wallace had said. "If leadership fails, we need a trigger to protect our investment." Our internal lawyer refused, saying Julian would never give up majority control. I saw an opening. I knew Julian was getting lazy and favored nepotism. "What if we add a conditional clause?" I suggested. "Not a board majority by default, but a competency trigger. If specific performance indicators drop, or if there is a material breach of governance protocols, Oakwood gets temporary voting override to restructure the executive suite." "Julian will love the word strategic," I added. Wallace looked at me, seeing exactly what I was doing. I was building a trap door for the CEO. "Article 9B, Wallace said with a terrifying smile. strategic realignment due to governance failure or material mismanagement. We drafted it right there on page 165. It defined material mismanagement broadly, including hiring unqualified executive personnel and gross negligence regarding compliance reporting. Julian signed it without reading a single page. He just wanted the money. Article 9B was a kill switch, and Oliver, with his complete lack of regulatory knowledge, was dancing on the launch codes. All I had to do was wait for the material mismanagement to become undeniable. It took exactly 3 weeks for the wheels to come off. I watched from my apartment as the stock ticker wobbled. Oliver was busy disrupting. His first major initiative was a complete rebrand. He fired the external compliance auditing firm, a company we used for 7 years to ensure data handling met federal privacy standards. He replaced them with a boutique crypto agency run by his college friend. Firing a certified auditor for a friend was a potential breach of our data security covenants. Then came the vendor town hall. Oliver showed up late, wearing a headset microphone. He told the suppliers that payment terms were fluid and they wanted to operate on trust. Within 48 hours, 3 major vendors paused their shipments. They cited uncertainty regarding fiscal governance. The backlog of lost orders reached $18 million. But the cherry on top was the third quarter financial revision. Oliver did not understand the macro I warned him about. He manually entered revenue projections. He added a 0. Instead of projecting 5% growth, he projected 55%. Julian, desperate for a win, signed off on it without checking the math. They sent the preliminary guidance to the investors, including Oakwood Capital. It was fraud. Accidental, incompetent fraud, but fraud nonetheless. Stupidity is not a legal defense. You just handed me the gun, I whispered to myself. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had not called in 3 years. Wallace's office, the assistant answered. This is Donovan, I said. Tell Wallace I have an update on Article 9B and tell him to bring the good wine. We met at a dark, quiet wine bar. Wallace slid into the booth opposite me. You look rested, he noted. I handed him a physical copy of my dossier bound in black leather. I hear you received the preliminary guidance from Apex Logistics, I said. Wallace nodded. Aggressive numbers. 55% growth is a miracle. It is a typo, I said. I slid the binder to him. I showed him the original model versus Oliver's manual entry. She broke the formula link and typed in a number. Julian signed off on it. Wallace stared at the page. That is securities fraud. It is material mismanagement, I said. Turn the page. I showed him the email firing the compliance auditor. That triggers the vendor integrity clause. It is a breach of covenant. Wallace closed the binder. The shark smelled blood. Why are you giving me this? He asked. You want the CEO chair? No, I said. I do not want to fix their mess. I want the record corrected. I want to watch Julian realize that the boring legal clause he ignored is the thing that ends him. Wallace smiled. Article 9B requires an emergency board session. Tuesday, I said. The board meets on Tuesday. Wallace tapped the binder. You are a dangerous man, Donovan. I am just a strategist, I replied. Strategy is making sure consequences land on the right people. The weekend before the Tuesday board meeting was tense. The company's new launch was a disaster. The website crashed because Oliver forgot to pay the hosting fees. The stock price dropped 6%. On Monday afternoon, Wallace sent the formal notice for an emergency board meeting requested by Oakwood Capital. Julian called me that evening, sounding breathless and desperate. Donovan, he pleaded, we have a board check-in tomorrow. Oakwood is being fussy. I need you to look over the presentation. I can pay you double your rate. He wanted me to save him and hide the massive fraud. I am busy, I said. Please, Julian begged. Oliver is overwhelmed. Just come in tomorrow morning. I will be there, I said. I did not say I was coming to help. Tuesday morning dawned gray and rainy. I arrived at the office wearing a sharp white suit, the color of a surgeon stepping into the operating room. I stood in the hallway outside the glass-walled boardroom. Julian was pacing. Oliver was scrolling on his phone. The other board members looked grim. Then the elevator opened. Wallace stepped out with 2 junior associates carrying boxes of files and a forensic accountant. Wallace pushed open the heavy glass doors. The conversation died. This is not a discussion of growing pains, Wallace announced. This is a formal invocation of Article 9B of the investment agreement. He pulled out a thick document and slid it down the long mahogany table right to Julian. Notice of leadership disqualification proceedings. Julian stared at it. You cannot do this. I have majority voting rights. Not under conditions of material mismanagement, Wallace replied. We have evidence of securities fraud regarding the guidance, gross negligence in vendor compliance, and willful destruction of governance controls. Fraud? Julian stammered, going pale. That was just a draft. It was submitted to the investor portal, Wallace countered, making it a binding disclosure. The manual entry constitutes intent to deceive. The board members shifted away from Julian like he was radioactive. But Oliver prepared the numbers, Julian said, instantly betraying his own nephew. Oliver looked terrified. I just thought 55% looked better, he trembled. You manifested a federal crime, Wallace said coldly. He signaled the accountant. We are freezing all executive authority. Security will escort the current suite off the premises. Julian shouted, slamming the table. Donovan! Where is Donovan? He can explain this. Wallace looked at him. Donovan is the one who documented the fire while you were handing out matches. Julian froze. He looked around wildly and then saw me standing outside the glass wall. My white suit caught the light. I was not gloating. I was just watching like a judge at a sentencing. The betrayal on his face was immense, but it was nothing compared to what he had done to me. The board quickly voted. Every hand went up to suspend Julian. 2 security guards stepped into the room. It was precise and beautiful. Oliver started crying about his velvet couch. As Julian was escorted out, he stopped by the glass door. You built this trap, he whispered, looking defeated. I built a safety net, Julian, I replied softly. You just decided to jump without checking if you were caught in it. He walked away. The sound of his footsteps fading was the sweetest music. The boardroom was silent. The chairman, a man named Silas, cleared his throat. He looked at the empty chairs. Mr. Donovan, Silas said warmly, perhaps you should join us. I walked into the room but did not sit down. We are effectively rudderless, Silas stammered. We need an interim CEO and a competent chief strategy officer. The board is prepared to offer you the position with triple the equity. It was everything I wanted 3 weeks ago. I could sit in that chair and rule the kingdom, but I looked at the panicked faces of men who only valued competence when their own money was at stake. The hunger was gone. I appreciate the offer, Silas, I said smoothly, but I decline. The room gasped. I engineered accountability, I explained. I did not engineer a job interview. I suggest you promote the senior data analyst. She actually read the compliance manual. I turned and walked out. Where are you going? Silas called out. I am starting my own firm, I said, and my first client is Oakwood Capital. Keep your house in order. I walked to the elevator, my steps echoing with unadulterated freedom. 2 months later, the dust settled. Julian took an early retirement in disgrace. Oliver tried to become a life coach on social media, filming in his basement. He was irrelevant. The company barely survived. As for me, I sit in my new office in a sleek downtown loft. My firm partners with Oakwood Capital. Wallace finds the companies rotting from the inside, and I perform the surgery. Sometimes we save the patient, sometimes we just salvage the organs. Either way, we win. I received a package yesterday containing a photo of the old executive team. Julian had written a note on the back. You were always the smartest person in the room. I threw the photo in the trash but kept the expensive frame. Revenge is not a dish. It is a deliverable with a timeline and a critical path. If you execute it correctly, it just feels like balancing the books. Real power operates with quiet precision. My resignation was not surrender. It was the strategic trigger that unraveled everything. But let me tell you more about the aftermath, because the fallout was much more extensive than just Julian losing his job. When Oakwood Capital took over, they did not just clean house in the executive suite. They conducted a full systemic audit of every department that had operated under Julian's negligence. It turned out that the culture of nepotism ran deep. There were entirely fabricated job titles assigned to distant relatives and friends of the board. One cousin was earning a 6-figure salary as a corporate wellness synergy coordinator. Another was a consultant who had never actually submitted a single report. When the auditors finished their work, they had fired over 40 people who had been leeching off the company's revenue for years. It was a bloodbath, but a necessary one. The company had been carrying so much dead weight that it was a miracle they had remained profitable for as long as they did. The vendor situation took months to resolve. The four major vendors who paused their shipments due to Oliver's ridiculous payment terms had to be heavily compensated. Oakwood Capital had to authorize emergency payouts and offer highly favorable long-term contracts just to restore confidence in the supply chain. The boutique crypto agency that Oliver had hired was immediately terminated, and Oakwood's lawyers threatened them with litigation until they returned every single cent they had been paid. The legal mess left behind by that one decision cost the company thousands of dollars in billable hours alone. As for Chloe in human resources, she managed to keep her job, but only because she cooperated fully with the investigators. She handed over every single email, every memo, and every document that proved she had been forced to act under Julian's direct orders. She called me once, a few weeks after the explosion, just to say thank you. "Thank you for leaving that governance gap memo on the desk," she had said. "It gave me the leverage I needed to prove I was not complicit. I did not do it for her, but I accepted the gratitude anyway." My new firm, Donovan Strategic, started thriving immediately. Word got around the private equity circles that there was a fixer who specialized in identifying corporate rot before it destroyed an investment. Wallace sent me 3 new clients in the first month alone. Each case was a variation of the same theme: arrogant leadership, unchecked nepotism, and a complete disregard for the boring legal details that actually held their empires together. I would walk into their boardrooms, armed with spreadsheets and clauses, and watch as men who thought they were untouchable realized they had signed away their kingdoms. It is a very specific kind of satisfaction, watching the realization dawn on them. They always assume they are the smartest people in the room, right up until the moment you prove them wrong. Julian's early retirement was not as peaceful as he tried to make it seem in the press release. He moved to Florida, bought a large house in a gated community, and tried to pretend he was a visionary taking a well-deserved break. But the truth was that Oakwood Capital had forced him to divest his remaining shares at a significantly reduced valuation as part of the settlement agreement. He lost millions. He also lost his reputation. No serious firm would ever let him near an executive board again. He was radioactive. I heard through the grapevine that he tried to start a new venture capital fund, but he could not secure a single meeting. People remembered the public humiliation, the fraud allegations, and the sheer incompetence of letting a 23-year-old boy crash a multi-million-dollar logistics company in 3 weeks. And Oliver? His lifestyle coaching career fizzled out almost as quickly as it began. It turns out that manifesting abundance is much harder when your uncle is no longer bankrolling your life. He had to sell the sports car he had bought with his signing bonus. The last I heard, he was working as an entry-level marketing assistant at a mid-sized paper company in the Midwest. A job he actually had to earn. A job where he actually had to show up on time and do the work. I like to think that it builds character. But knowing Oliver, he is probably just complaining about the lighting in the office and trying to expense his iced lats. Looking back, the most valuable lesson I learned was not about loyalty or strategy. It was about leverage. You can work 80 or 90 hours a week. You can save deals, build models, and turn a failing business into a gold mine. But if you do not have leverage, you have nothing. Leverage is the only currency that matters when the people in charge decide you are expendable. My leverage was Article 9B. It was the careful documentation of every failure. It was the willingness to walk away and let the fire burn. If you ever find yourself in a situation where your hard work is being handed to someone who has not earned it, do not get angry. Do not throw a tantrum. Do not scream at the boss. Just quietly gather your leverage, build your trap, and wait. The incompetent will always expose themselves. All you have to do is make sure the right people are watching when they fall.